Good morning. I'm Jonathan Stevens. I'm the Permanent Secretary of the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And what we hope to do this morning is to give you a chance to see and experience how culture, media and sport can make a difference, how they can change and inspire lives and places. And we've got live performance from vocal trio Juice and 4 trumpet players of Bella Tromba. We've got some special guests who've seen lives and places changed and inspired for themselves. We've got a promising young athlete who works now with kids turned off school. We've got a former coal miner who's helped bring sculpture to his mining town. And we've got a gold medal winner who's at the heart of plans for London 2012. But first, let's start with you. What's your passion? Are you involved in culture, media, or sport? So let's start by getting some exercise. So everyone stand up, please. Don't worry, not too much exercise. Very simple. Now, in the last 6 months, if you've been to a museum or gallery, please sit down. Now, if you've been to a library in the last 6 months, sit down. If you have been involved, played in a band, sung in a choir, performed in a drama, sit down. If you've played sport, right, I had 4 or 5 more still to go, but the good news is, oh, I'm sorry. Seen live music or theatre? Brilliant, sit down, well done. The good news is you are representative of the UK population because 95% of us participate or engage in some way with culture or sport. And research shows that 1 in 2 of those people who are engaged in social groups engage, for example, because of sport. And if you engage in culture or sport, research shows that you're more likely to know your neighbours, you're more likely to trust your neighbours, you're more likely to take a positive view of your own life, you're more likely to take a positive view of your community. Even, there's some research shows that membership of a sports club, for example, we think of as worth an extra £3,500 on income. So, but the impact and benefits of culture and sport go much wider than just for the individual. Think about the positive benefits of exercise on health spending. Just one UK study in Scotland alone showed that reducing the inactive population in Scotland by 5% would save the health service there £3.5 million. Or if you give young people a structured activity, then it can help to reduce crime and disorder. Splash Extra, a school holiday activity program funded by DCMS, reduced crime by 5% in the areas where it operated. Or culture or sport can give pride and identity to a community. Think of the role played by the Angel of the North or the Commonwealth Games in Manchester, both helping to drive a new sense of pride and identity in an area and economic regeneration. So how does the government help and work with these sectors? Well, in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, we have 3 overarching objectives. We want to sustain excellence in our sectors because it is excellence in culture and sport that is the inspiration that attracts and engages people. But we also want to widen the opportunity to engage and experience in that excellence because we want the widest possible opportunity available. And we also want to maximize economic impact, playing our part, for example, in responding to the recession. Let me give you just quickly a few examples of how we follow through on those objectives. Last year, 2008, Liverpool was the European Capital of Culture. And appropriately for a city famed for its music, that brought together an incredible diversity of performers, from an opening concert headlined by Sir Paul McCartney to a personal highlight for me of Sir Simon Rattle returning to his native city to conduct the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. And it brought tens of thousands onto the city streets one rainy day to experience a giant mechanized spider invading the city centre. That year attracted 3.5 million new visitors to Liverpool, generated an £800 million boost to Liverpool's economy, and it left a lasting legacy in 2 new museums, a new arena, and regeneration built on a renewed sense of identity. Now that was one city, but nationally, in the last year, we have widened opportunity through, for example, a new scheme worked up with the Arts Council for free theatre for the under-26s, headlined A Night Less Ordinary. Or we've also introduced, and thanks to many departments such as health, children's schools and families, communities and local government, a scheme to fund and support free swimming for over 60s and under 16s through local authorities, making free swimming available to 20 million people in the UK. And we've continued free visits to museums, which have increased visitor numbers since 2001 by 124%, an extra 49 million visits. And that means that even in a recession, with money tight, there's increasing opportunity for all to experience culture and sport. And that's not our only response to the recession, because the leisure, tourism, creative, sport sectors that we represent account for over 10% of the economy. And in the creative industries, film, music, video games, advertising, fashion, we have the potential for growth to help lead the UK out of the recession. Over the last 10 years, the creative industries have been growing at roughly twice the size of the rest of the economy put together, and are predicted to maintain that over the next 4 to 5 years. And so last month, with Business Innovation and Skills, we published Digital Britain, which sets out how the digital economy can be at the heart of future growth. And it set out how, building on digital switchover, we will provide the digital infrastructure through universal broadband to every household in the country. We will maintain world-class public broadcasting and set the frameworks in music and video and elsewhere to protect and nurture creative content. Now let me give you 2 examples of the range and diversity of the specific projects that we get involved in that show the sort of impact we and our sectors can have on national life. One somber and one an opportunity for celebration. Yesterday, the memorial for victims of the 7/7 bombings was unveiled in Hyde Park. And those horrendous attacks were seared on all our memories. But how do you provide a fitting memorial that meets the differing needs of families and victims, that reflects the collective impact and the individual grief, and that will stand the test of time? And that was the challenge for the project team of DCMS and Royal Park civil servants. And they worked directly with the families. They selected and worked with a UK firm of creative designers and oversaw the building of the memorial opened yesterday. And the result, and I saw it last week, is, I think, striking. From afar, a group of pillars. From close up, each one individually cast with subtly different markings and feel. The result, significant, creative, touches hearts. You can't put value on it. And looking forward, to the opportunities with London 2012, the Olympics and the Paralympics. Do you remember the day the bid was awarded? Did you share some of the inevitable doubts at the time? Would it be on time? Would the budget continually grow? Would it be a white elephant? Well, now it's taking real shape in Stratford. On time and on budget, with 3/4 of the budget going into regeneration, providing now, in the midst of recession, £6 billion of contracts for the construction sector and over 4,000 jobs on the Olympic Park. Working towards a great World Festival of Sport and Culture in 2012, but not just those 6 weeks, with the ambition between now and 2012 to get over 2 million more people physically active, and the opportunity for people up and down the country to volunteer and to participate. A real, living, national example of the opportunity our sectors present to change and inspire places and lives across the country. And now, I want to move on to talk with some people who can speak from their personal experience of the impact and change and inspiration of culture and sport on lives and places. So bear with me while I do my Michael Parkinson bit. I hope that no one is going to attack me with an emu, but I'm going to interview 3 guests. And our first guest was a promising tennis player and footballer before deciding to concentrate his skills on athletics. He went on to run the fastest 800 metres in the National Junior League, and after overcoming injury and surgery, he's now competing again and fixing his goal towards the London 2012 Olympics. But he also works on a mentoring programme with young children. So please welcome Sam Coombs. Sam, great. Come and sit down.
Thank you.
Now, Sam, you're working with school kids. How were your school days?
Well, to be honest with you, Jonathan, I wasn't the best student at school. I was a little bit naughty, and to be fair, I wouldn't think that I'd be sitting here today. What really drew me out of being a wayward kid was sport, and what it enabled me to have was structure every week, discipline in the fact that I had to turn up to training 3-4 times a week, and this sort of discipline, commitment and dedication really transferred over to school and made me focus in on my work and do better.
So how did you first get involved in sport? What inspired you?
Really, at school I had a few successes at primary school, and luckily I had supportive parents at the time who took me along to a range of different sporting clubs, and like Jonathan said, I played tennis and football, but also I went to the athletics club and successes grew there, and I chose athletics in the long term.
So now, tell us about this mentoring programme that you're involved in. What does that mean?
I think it's really important that a lot of us out here today recognise that our backgrounds, our parents or carers were very supportive of us when we were young. And if we wanted to do a sport or if we wanted to do an activity, they would encourage us, they would take us along, or we'd have neighbours who'd take us along and support our desires. The kids that I work with nowadays, they haven't got that support. They're involved, some of them are involved in gangs, or some of them have been involved in criminal activity, have been in young offenders institutes or in prison. And I try and mentor them out of these bad habits or these groups that they're in and take them into, structured activities such as sports clubs or activities within their communities that really help them and get them on a better pathway in life.
So how long do you work with one of your mentors?
The children and young people that I work with, because I also work with young adults, I work with it works over a period of about 4 to 8 months, dependent on how well they're doing. We carry on the project and we try and see them through a positive exit route, such as that they gain employment, they gain qualifications to take them on to further education, and sometimes, often as not, they get involved in a sports club, which is ongoing.
So what sort of change have you seen in the lives of the young people you're working with?
Well, a fantastic example. I worked with Jonathan last year, and I worked with a young man who was involved. He was in London, had been involved in knife crime at the time. It was all in the papers that young adults were getting knifed in the street. And this young kid was terrified. He was terrified of where he lived. He was frightened of his own peers within the area of London that he lived. And what we managed to do was get him involved in a local football team. He then created his own five-a-side club with friends from his estate. And what we managed to do was get him away from bad influences within his life and channel his focus into school. And basically got qualifications that enabled him to get on an electrical installation course in college, which was amazing for him. For us, it might not seem a big deal, but for him, it was a massive achievement, and he's now in college taking part in that course.
Brilliant. So, looking forward, what are your personal hopes for 2012?
Yeah, well, I'm training harder. I train at Loughborough University in the Midlands, and we train every day, usually twice a day. It's an awful lot. It's a big commitment that I have, but what I try and get across to the kids that I work with is that the commitment I show to my athletics is if they can show, 10% of that commitment to their own lives and to improving their own lives each and every day, then they too can achieve something.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep. Now, from sport to art. So our next guest played a major role in securing art for his local community, but his background wasn't an underground art movement, but it was underground. He was a coal miner. He worked down the mines for 17 years in St Helens in Merseyside. The mine closed and he was made redundant in 1991. In 2005, he nominated his mining town as a candidate for Channel 4's Big Art project, which resulted in a public sculpture called Dream being built on the mine's former slag heap. Let's see a short extract from the film that Channel 4 made of that.
If we looked at it as an ex-mine, but then we ain't going to get very far. What we're aiming for with the project, not to dwell in the past, but to look forward.
The motto of St Helens is Ex Terra Lucem, which means out of the earth comes light. So I think if we use that as our theme, really, it says what this place did, and it's poetic. Yeah. What you're concerned about as well is leaving this as a legacy for the future, not just as a monument to the past. Yeah.
The colliery is a very good place to put this sculpture. Can't wait till that's been built, can you? I can't, no.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I think so.
We've seen it.
Yeah.
Have you?
Please welcome Gary Conley.
Hi, John.
Now, Gary, you worked down the mine for 15 years, your grandfather, great-grandfather before you, so the mine must have been at the heart of the community.
It is Sutton Manor, it's St Helens. It used to be the Lancashire coalfield, although we're in Merseyside now. I was born in Lancashire, and that's a Lancashire mine. It was developed the mine in 1906 and ran through right until 1991. It had a purpose-built community. They had a purpose-built village built right in front of the colliery that housed not only, the mine workers, but for people who worked on the auxiliary part of the mine as well. So it bred many generations of miners, mine included. My great-grandfather Enoch, he was a miner at Sutton Manor Colliery. My grandfather was a miner there, Jack. And then they had my mother, so we skipped a generation. And then I became a miner and leaving school.
So then when the mine closed, that must have had a huge impact on the community.
Very much so. I mean, as I said, it was a purpose-built community there. So when the mine closed, you know, the direction and the money ceased. So, you know, the local village shop shut, you know, and it fell into a little bit of disarray, really, up until now.
So how did a group of ex-miners get involved in public art?
Well, I now work, since I left the mine, I work now for the local authority. And I work just the floor above the Arts Council of St Helens. And the arts ambassador there, Sean Durney, approached me one day and said, would you like to come in and help nominate the site? So he sort of passed the baton to me, and then from then on we ran with it. So that was my involvement. He was aware that I used to work at St Manor Colliery, because I still have a lump of coal on my desk from the mine, which, as I explained to you today, I brought home from my mother. My mother was an Art Deco fan, so we had this brick fireplace, and she said to me, would you bring home a lump of coal? And I think she expected a lump of coal around about this big, and the piece I brought was this big. And when she died, we found the lump of coal amongst her clothes. She was ill for many years. And then I just sort of took it to work and varnished it and made it a talking point. The arts officer saw this, put the two together, and asked me would I nominate the site. So it's just pure luck, really. So
when you got involved in nominating the site, then was it just you, or how did you work with others?
I started it off, I did the original application, but I soon realised that I was going to have to get a lot of people on board, and anybody who's seen the series and saw the other sites quickly realised that with public art, there's no way you can do it on your own, because there's a lot of bureaucracy to go through, and there's a lot of planning you have to go through, a lot of committees you have to sit on, and of course a massive fundraising, because Dream didn't come cheap.
So who was involved with you?
There was myself, and I got together a group of 10 other ex-miners, some who you saw on the film there. Mm-hmm. And I chose the guys who I knew well, who would sell not only St Helens, but the programme in the correct way. I didn't want it like a reality TV show, where we would end up like some of the contestants you see on Big Brother. I wanted to sell St Helens in a passionate way, really.
So when you were thinking about what sort of art, where did you look for your inspiration?
Well, initially, on the site, we got a curator involved, which you saw there, Laurie Peake, who's been outstanding and involved in Liverpool 08. And we said to her, we want a mining monument. You know, we said, that's what we want. On the site, we want a mining monument to represent the site as it was. And then she took us around to various sites, and we travelled up to the northeast to see the Edge of the North, which absolutely blew me away. Then we went into Liverpool, we saw Turning the Place Over with Richard Wilson. We travelled to Germany to see some works by Richard Serra. And then finally we went to Crosby Beach to see another place by Anthony Gormley. Within them 12 months, our ideas had completely changed. And we went something from a mining monument to something that we wanted more contemporary, a talking piece, something that would be a landmark, an icon, if you like, for the site.
So then you worked with an artist. Who was that, and what ideas did he come up with?
His name was Jaume Plensa. He's a Catalan artist from Barcelona. And he'd done major works in Chicago. He'd done the Crown Fountain in Chicago. And that inspired us, because we wanted to work with somebody who'd work with structure, size and light as well, because light being very important with the ex Terra Lucium motto, from the earth came light. But his initial concept was a giant 20-metre miner's lamp. So,
but wouldn't that have been a great traditional image for the mining community?
Absolutely. And when we started off on this journey, we would have all put our hands up and said, that is what we want. We want a 20-metre giant miner's lamp to represent that the site was an ex-mine. But we started to sort of broaden our horizon and look out of the box, really. And when we saw these other sites, what had inspired us, that we wrote a brief and said, really, we want anything but a miner's lamp. So Jaume, this world-class artist, produced this miner's lamp, and we all sat there, and we all, like little school kids, went, yes, very nice, thank you. And then, a week later, we all got together and said, who's going to tell him we don't like it? So, as 10 big burly pitmen, we all went to the curator, Laurie, and said, would you go back to him and say that he's produced something looking through our eyes, rather than him looking through his own eyes, in which we wanted in the first place. So we met with him again, and he's an absolute gentleman to work with. And he said to us, well, do you know, the lamp wasn't my first idea. He said, my first idea was something really different and contemporary. He said, but I produced the lamp thinking it was what you would have wanted. So we all said, well, what was your first idea? And he said, Dream. And he just brought a maquette out of Dream. And we all just started applauding, you know, and said, that is what we want. Something that would reflect the past, you know, but something that also would look to the future of the site.
So tell us a bit about it. We've got a picture up there, but it's hard to get the size and scale. How big is it?
It's 20 metres tall.
So sort of how many double-decker buses?
5 double-decker buses.
5 double-decker buses.
It's bigger than the Angel of the North. I'll just get that one in. It's 20 metres tall, and it's a face of a young girl who's 9 years of age with androgynous qualities, really. And her face has been stretched by a third. Very similar to the faces on Easter Island. I don't know if you've ever seen those. So they stretched the face by a third. Her name is Anna. She's from Barcelona as well. She's a model from Barcelona. And everything worked except for the ears. So we've got her face with someone else's ears on because he didn't think the ears was right. And what she's doing, she's got her eyes closed in a very dreamlike state. So what she's doing, she's thinking, reflecting about what the site used to be, i.e. mine, but also not only her future, but for the future of the site and St Helens. You know, so it encapsulates both the past and the future as well.
So you started off having one idea and then ended up with something very different. What about the whole of the community? Did they just go, oh yes, no, that's brilliant?
The reason we chose this was to create a talking point. We wanted an absolute 50-50 split of people who absolutely loved it and people who hated it. And the reason we wanted that, it would then create deliberation. It would cause conversation, and it has done in equal quantities. Yeah. You know, we have this mantra with, you know, love it or loathe it, just don't ignore it, and that is what we've got with Dream. We've got something that you either love or hate, very similar to the Angel of the North. I love the Angel of the North. There's people who I know who absolutely hate it, but there's one thing. You won't forget about it. And that's what we wanted, something with Dream, something that would reflect the past, take us into the future, and always be a talking point.
Mm-hmm. And what next? Is it complete now? What is the future?
No, it's as you see it now, it's only half complete. It's not lit. There's going to be a beam of light from Dream's Head that will go 2 kilometres into the sky. And what that's supposed to represent, it's supposed to represent a Dream's thoughts, the thoughts that a 9-year-old child and ourselves would have. And the beam of light is us reaching to the sky with our thoughts. Because when we have thoughts or we have dreams, we reach to the sky to them. And that's what the beam's supposed to represent. As well, very subtly, is to represent what lies beneath, and that is a coal shaft. So the shaft of light also equals the coal shaft. So it's very thought-provoking.
Now, but some people would say, well, here's quite a bit of money. How much did it cost?
£2 million.
£2 million spent on this. But your community could have done with jobs, training schemes. Why public art?
Well, if you've read the local paper, you'll see the criticism we've had for this £2 million. What we tried to put over to people is, though, that money was set aside for public art. And rather than really criticising us getting that, They should be applauding that we've brought that into St Helens, a little community, like I say, in between Manchester and Liverpool. You know, if this was in, we've said this before, if this was in London, you know, it would be revered. It'd be the next, you know, the next big thing. Never mind the fourth plinth, what we've got going on now. This would be, you know, it would be rival Nelson's column. But what we've tried to say to people is, we want to create St Helens its own identity. We've lost all the major contributors to St Helens. We had Pilkington's Glass, we had Beecham's, and we had the mining industry. You know, those three industries now have gone, and we're left really with a world-class rugby league team, which is a very Northern Corridor sport anyway. What this will give us, hopefully, is a national, you know, a national identity. So when people are thinking about coming into St Helens, they'll have something that they can identify to, you know, and people, you know, like a beacon of hope, really, for the future.
So what are your hopes for the future of St Helens?
That we can regenerate the industries there again, get some major players back to St Helens. Like I said, we've lost an awful lot. So regeneration is a massive next step for St Helens, and this is just the beginning. Dream is the beginning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Gary Conley. And now, a hop, skip and a jump onto our final interviewee. That may give you a bit of a clue. In 1995, he set the world record for triple jump, a world record that still stands today. In 2002, he simultaneously held the Commonwealth, European, World and Olympic gold medals for triple jump. And since then, he's been involved in the bid for London for 2012 and is now involved in the organising committee for London 2012. Please welcome Jonathan Edwards. So Jonathan, how did you first get involved in sport? What was your inspiration?
I think two things really. First, my dad loved sport. He was a great cricket player and rugby player, so I think from the moment that I could toddle along, there was a ball in my hand and we were out in the garden. I think he loved doing that. And then I went to a school where sport was valued, quite simply, you know, right from the very start. And of course I was good at it, and of course that helped.
And then you've competed in 2 Olympic Games. Four Olympic Games. Now tell us something about what it's like to compete in an Olympic Games. What's special about the Olympics?
My first Olympics was in 1988, and it was my first ever representative honour for my country. So I went, although I was 22, as a kind of a very young man, into an Olympic village with nearly 10,000 athletes, 5,000 officials, 200 nations, and really was quite overwhelmed by it. But what you realise, having been to World Championships and European Championships and Commonwealth Games, there is a different feel about the Olympics, and indeed the Paralympics. And it's got something to do, I think, with the history. I mean, obviously the ancient Olympics started in 763 BC, and it was always about more than just sport. And then you had the start of the modern Olympic movement with de Coubertin trying to revitalise French and European youth and looking at the English public school system, the way education and sport were combined. So there's always been that sense that it's as much about values as it is about just sporting achievement for the sake of it. And if you speak to people at the IOC, that's what they talk about. They don't think of it as being an event company. It's a values movement. In the case of the Olympics, excellence, respect and friendship. And the Paralympics, again, has a set of values. So it's about more than sport, and I think that's what makes it special. Of course, it's the pinnacle of achievement if you compete in an Olympic sport or a Paralympic sport, but it reaches out into everyday life.
And tell us a bit about competing, because I remember seeing the world record that you set in 1995, and you smashed the previous world record, and it still stands, and you seem to be just sort of floating along the jump. But that was the result of years and years of hard work and training. What kept you going?
I think it's kind of strange, really, given that lots of people knew me for my Christian faith and not jumping on a Sunday, and I kind of subsequently lost that faith since I've retired. But when I was competing, it was very much my faith. I felt God had given me this gift, and I had a responsibility to use it. So I was driven by this great sense of purpose and meaning. You know, this is what was meant for me. This is what God wanted me to do. So that essentially was my motivation. And I very much focused on the process and being the best that I could be. You know, clearly I had goals, but that wasn't the be-all and end-all. This is just what I felt I should do. It was almost my calling. And that's what gave me the motivation. And then I let the results take care of itself. And it was almost, it's not that they didn't matter, because I hated losing. And I wanted to win, or at least to do my best. So undergirding all of that was a sense this is what was for me, and come what may, I was going to give my utmost to it until the time was right to move on to something else.
So why then did you get involved in the bid for London? What were your hopes and dreams?
It very much ties into that. I mean, I've been very influenced by a psychoanalyst called Viktor Frankl, who talks about or humankind's primary goal being to find meaning and purpose in their lives. And in 2012, I saw that I'd just retired from athletics, and so it's like a case of what's next? What can I believe in? What can I give my life to, at least in part? And 2012 was exactly that. I think I was very fortunate to compete, at a high level, and achieved a lot and changed a few people's lives around me. I felt by getting involved with 2012, there was an opportunity to influence and change an entire country. And I think part of that was competing in Sydney in 2000. My night for winning my gold medal was Cathy Freeman's night. And I was very much a sideshow in Sydney on that evening. And to be in that stadium and to get that sense of the whole country behind that athlete, the volunteers as well, and the pride that they had in hosting the world for the greatest sporting event on the planet, I think deeply influenced my kind of wish and desire to get involved with 2012. I thought this is just a fantastic event for a country, not just for the sportsmen and women, not just for a few weeks in the summer of 2012. This can have a much longer lasting impact. A bit like some of the stuff you've talked about. Culture and sport influencing lives. It's not just about a few great athletes. And I'm just really interested to hear Gary speaking about the dream, and his hopes for it. Because when I first went to Newcastle, I was at Durham University, moved up to the northeast in 1987. It was a sort of post-industrial wasteland, and it wasn't a place there with a great deal of hope or identity or even pride about itself. And then, because we had the Angel of the North, what a ridiculous idea. How much money are we going to spend on this? It could be schools, it could be hospitals, whatever else. And yet that was the catalyst to make the Northeast what it is today. It's made a massive impact. And, I very sincerely hope that the dream has the same impact on your part of the world.
Exactly right. We didn't want sort of a rip-off of the Angel of the North. We wanted a spin-off. Rather than a rival, we wanted a spin-off. If we get half of the success of the Angel of the North, then we'll be more than overjoyed.
So what about when London won the bid? Was that a surprise? What were your hopes and fears?
It was a huge surprise, actually. I remember the launch at the Royal Opera House, I think at the end of 2003, 2004, and it was much more in hope than expectation. Paris were the clear favourites. We'd just handed back the World Athletics Championships for 2005, so we hadn't exactly covered ourselves in glory as a nation in respect of sporting events and hosting them. And then we got an initial poor report, I think, from the IOC, but we got through to the shortlist. And then momentum built and built and built. Seb Coe gave, I think, outstanding leadership, as did Seb Coe, as in Ken Livingstone, and also Tessa Giles. She did a wonderful job, I think, within government of persuading us to bid. And by the time we got to Singapore, there was a sense that we were just sort of drawing sort of neck and neck with Paris. But when we went in for the final decision, all the photographers and camera crews were in front of Paris. We were on the right-hand side, and they were on the left-hand side, and they were all there. And there was like 3 or 4 in front of us. You kind of thought, oh, well, they must know we haven't won it. And then, of course, Jacques Rogge said London rather than Paris, and the place just erupted. And I think everybody was hugging everybody. It was one of those evenings where, no matter who you were hugging somebody. So Bobby Charlton was just, he was sort of, uncontrollable, just with emotion, because I think he somebody of his experience understood what this could do, and what a prize it was for the whole of the UK, not just for London in 2012.
Yes, and tell us about some of your hopes for what it can do, because of course it's 6 weeks of great sport, a great festival in 2012, but is that all?
Absolutely not. I mean, we put it forward as a Games for the whole of the UK with many, many benefits. And I would say the reason that we bid in the first place was not to host the games. It was about the whole regeneration of the East End of London. And if any of you get a chance to go, maybe just walk along the Greenway by the Olympic site and see how that is transforming what was a very run-down and derelict part of London. That's inspiration in itself. But then, I get to travel across the whole of the UK. I'm Deputy Chair of the Nations and Regions, which is a huge privilege to see the energy and enthusiasm around 2012 and the benefits that are happening now. In terms of hard cash, business contracts, I think over half so far have gone out across the UK. You mentioned 6 billion. One of the sponsors, Lloyds TSB, has estimated that 21 billion pounds will be generated for the economy right across the Olympic piece. You've got the volunteers, you're going to have people from all over the country volunteering. It's a very simple story and a trivial story, but I remember going to Northern Ireland on a roadshow, and this probably 65, 70-year-old gentleman came up to me and said, I was so excited when we won the bid. He said, I went straight out to a sports nutrition store. He said, I bought a big tub of protein powder. I'm thinking, where is this going? What does he think he can do for the Olympics? And he said, I ripped off the branding. I said, I poured the protein powder in the bin. And he said, I'm saving to come to watch the games in 2012. And it can have an impact on people's lives like that. And something more serious, the Personal Best Programme, which is associated with volunteering, long-term unemployed people, low educational qualifications, get the incentive to be guaranteed an interview to be a volunteer for the Games if they complete this very basic volunteer qualification. It's been piloted in London, it's now in the southwest and the northeast, and the statistics in London are great. Young people going on to do further educational qualifications, volunteering, and in some cases getting jobs for the first time.
So, frighteningly, we're over halfway between bid and 2012. You're closely involved with it. How's it going?
It's going amazingly well. I think, as you said, on the 6th of July 2005, the whole country celebrated what was an incredible achievement. But there was always doubts in our minds, because I think we are slightly nervous of our ability to deliver. We think of things like Wembley Stadium or the Dome and Terminal 5 and think, well, will 2012 become another one of those stories? And absolutely the opposite is the case. The Olympic Park is streaming away. It's well ahead of schedule and is actually, I think, the latest figures show that it's going to come in slightly under budget from what we'd anticipated, which is wonderful. The organising committee has raised, of which I'm a part, £500 million against a very bleak economic climate. So we are exactly where we want to be and probably slightly ahead. No complacency, because it is a tremendously complex operation to put on the Games. No, I think the country is going to have cause to be incredibly proud in 2012, and I think that's really, really important. Our ability to welcome the athletes of the world, and indeed the entire world, to London in 2012 and put on a great show.
So look, let me ask each of you now, looking forward, suppose we're at a future civil service live event in 2020, and we're looking back.
As a thought.
What would you, each of you, have liked to have seen, personally, or for the people you work with, the places you work with? What would you like to have seen achieved over the years between now and 2020? Sam?
Yeah, definitely. For the young adults and the young people that I work with, significant transformation in their life. I think sport, with 2012 coming on, and culture with the various artworks that are going on in the country, there's a great opportunity for young people in our society right now to get involved with projects in their life that will prove successful. At the moment, there's a lot of bad media around young people wearing hoods and being involved in crime and stuff like that. Whereas if we give them a chance and we embrace the opportunities that are out there, I think young people can look forward to a successful and bright future within this country.
Just hope we have a massive regeneration of St Helens. We've lost a lot of industry there now, so we're hoping that Dream will become a beacon of hope, really, that people will now want to, rather than leave the town, will sort of come into the town, and we can get some major industries back in there, and we'll have a sense of pride, once again. That's the hope.
And I think quite simply to see sport valued right at the heart of our national life. I think it's probably been sidelined, particularly in schools, for a number of years, and with 2012 and the success of that, that sport is very much embedded in the life of our nation, and that it can enrich all of our lives, whether or not we're gold medal winners or not.
Great, thank you very much. Please thank Sam, Gary, and Jonathan. And now we've heard something about the impact that sport and culture can have on lives and places, the inspiration it can bring. Now we've got a chance to experience some of that for ourselves. We've got two groups from a scheme called Live Music Now, which is supported by the Arts Council. Live Music Now brings the highest quality music into everyday lives of people who, whether through disadvantage or disability, would not otherwise experience it. So please welcome Bella Tromba, for the most outstanding young trumpeters in the UK, and the ensemble vocal talents of Juice.
Good morning, everybody. We are Juice. We're going to sing a song by Paul Robinson, a living composer, called The Triadic Riddles of Water. It's a setting of a medieval poem, Anonymous, about water and ice. you. Now, we've been with live music now for about a year and a half. The scheme was set up by the violinist Yehudi Menuhin 30 years ago, and its main two aims were to bring live classical music and other types of music as well into places where they wouldn't normally get access to live performance, and also to give young musicians performance opportunities and to help them develop their music leadership skills and educational skills.
We've performed, we're based with the London office as Juice, but we've actually performed across the country. We were in Herefordshire a couple of weeks ago, and we're off to Yorkshire next week for a few days. Most of our work has been in schools and day centres for people, adults and children, with a broad range of physical and learning disabilities. We get fantastic response from everywhere where we go. It's very rewarding for us. We can, sometimes we'll go into a place where there may be people with profound physical disabilities, so it's quite difficult at first to actually see whether we're having any sort of impact at all. But the carers will suddenly point out a movement or some sort of a slight move of the head or something, and they're just incredibly impressed straight away that it's having such an effect on these people, which is just incredibly rewarding for us.
One of the best reactions we've had recently was in Herefordshire in a school for children with moderate learning difficulties. And we were singing an arrangement of Hallelujah, as in X Factor and Leonard Cohen, pop song Hallelujah, because it's nice to do something that the audiences recognise once in a while. And as we got to the chorus, we just heard from somewhere in the audience this beautiful and incredibly loud, totally in tune rendition of the chorus with us. And Anna found who it was. It was a boy about this high, aged possibly 8, with autism. And he was so fantastic that Anna dragged him up on stage, held his hand, and got him to sing the chorus with us. But what was quite interesting is that he didn't know the verses at all. And so when we were singing the verses, he'd be kind of jumping up and down and trying to distract us and talk to us. You know, we're trying to sing. And then as soon as the chorus would come around again, like a switch would go off inside him, and he'd be singing like as beautifully as Alexandra Berkman. It was amazing. His carers and all the teachers and staff in the school were in pieces, both crying and laughing, and I have to admit that I actually joined them. I totally fell apart, and I had to stop and go off because I just couldn't bear it. He was so good. So that was a really, really wonderful reaction and an example of the kind of responses we get sometimes. And we're going to invite Bella Tromba back on before we ask you to join in with something. So here's Bella Tromba.